Good day, everyone. So, what I want to show you now is why is financial modeling important? As an engineer, and when we set up projects in the mining industry and process industries, it's also really about trying to, well, not trying, our primary thing is to make money for our shareholders and all the stakeholders involved in what we're doing. So I'm going to go into this, and I will also later tell you my story about how I got involved into financial modeling, and many a true word is said in jest. So this little cartoon here is very appropriate, and I'll explain why it is so important to me, at least in the world of financial modeling. So this is a statement from a previous CEO of Rio Tinto, but I think if you were to ask any CEO today, they would echo many of the statements in some form or fashion that is exactly said here and what I mentioned earlier. Now, the process of financial modeling is to be considered if you think about it. When we do projects as engineers in the normal sense, we would follow a very traditional approach of specification, design, development, testing, implementation, and it's almost cost control. But when you're in the early phases of a project, you don't know what is really the important drivers of your project. Could it be CapEx? Could it be OpEx? Could it be grade? How important is it? So what is done then is rather the agile approach, and that is very much an approach that people in the IT industry are pretty familiar with when developing software. In the early phases of a project, you would do, the first thing is you do a conceptual model. And all that is really is a pretty picture of somebody that knows the business intimately of how they think the business works. And typically then, once you've got the conceptual model, a spreadsheet model is built of this. And often this gives some outputs that gives insights into the model. And often a lot of aha moments come out here. So it's managerial insights that come in that speak to the management situation. And often you would find the conceptual model needs to be reviewed, or an aspect that you thought of the conceptual model was very important, maybe for argument's sake, SRB was not important, and you look at it in your context, it suddenly becomes an important issue. Now, in a project life cycle, you've got typically the concept, the pre-feasibility, and the bankable feasibility stage. When you go to the latter stages of a project life cycle, then your traditional approach is very valid. Your team is very large. And typically in the early phase of a project, your team is fairly small, people that are knowledgeable of your business, and you build a financial model because you need to be fairly quick and flexible in understanding what are the issues that drive the business or the project that you want to embark upon. And there is a transition, and it starts becoming from a more agile approach to the more traditional approach where you just do the cost control of the project. Now, and often the divergent phases where the number of ideas you generate, because you want to actually have one plan that works very well. And you would find it in a project, think of a mining project. Where do you start mining? What resource do you mine first, second, third, fourth? Where should the plant be? There are so myriads of options that you have to start narrowing down, and some of them get narrowed down fairly quickly, even in the concept phase. And once you go to pre-feasibility and you enter it, you should try and generate more options for yourself, because you're not really, you want to explore what is the best business plan for your project going forward. Now, what I have found is that in the commodities game, at least, your model or your conceptual model is fairly consistent. You've got an ore resource. You would typically mine it. It would go to a plant or beneficiation stage. You would transport it, and then it goes to market. And these different activities have different importances depending on what project you're sitting on. And of course, if you think about it, if you've got an ore resource, and this is why your geology is quite important, or at least understanding thereof, and how it impacts on the market. Because take coal as an example. If you were to take a high-grade coal, it means that your yield will become a lot lower, so you've got a lot more waste. And so hence you've got a high grade, so a smaller volume to transport, more revenue. But then if you do low grade coal, you've got a lot of volume, less waste to handle and the cost there, but your price decreases. So you've got this interplay that you need to work on. And the other thing is that I found is that as you do develop your financial model, the first and most important thing is understanding the physical movement of your goods or the valuable material, as well as your trucks, etc., and how they move. And because that determines your cost that you would incur in each of these stages. Now, if you think of this picture that I've got here, is that a financial model is almost a series of these pictures to make like a movie of your project. So for argument's sake, in the early stages of a project, your capital would be important. But once the capital is sunk, now you're starting to operate. Now suddenly the revenue is important to controlling the OPEX, the cost, etc. Things like that are becoming important at that stage. Now, if you did a good financial model, you can get an idea of what are the things that are eating into your revenue. Because remember, OPEX, CAPEX, and SIB spend each of them on different aspects, eating into your revenue and leaving you with the SIB, which is what all the shareholders and investors are interested in. But these are the types of things that you need to generate at the end of a financial model, and also that sensitivity to see what is the most important issue and where should you be focusing attention on. Now, coming back to my little cartoon in the beginning, and my story, the way why I got involved in financial modeling is, in a project, you're good at Excel, so why don't you do it? Now, it becomes quite scary because these spreadsheets can become quite large, and there's a lot of pressure, and because everybody's very interested in the number, and there's a lot of complexity often becomes involved. And you could imagine if you make an error in your spreadsheet and then you've got these multi-million rand decisions, it could be quite a disaster. So, and in that progress, as I was doing at the time, I saw financial models of fairly reputable companies, and I must be honest, I was quite disappointed in a lot of them because their complexity often detracted from what they were trying to answer, and I think they were getting themselves all confused. But anyway, so the one day I was at a course, and there was a guy that introduced us to the FAST standard, and he said, okay, if you want to keep your models all complex and organize job security for you, but you don't really know if your model's right, don't follow me. And he kept quiet and don't listen to me. And he kept quiet for, I must say, quite an uncomfortable 2 minutes. He says, okay, let you decide. And he sat down. He kept quiet. He said, okay, you're still here. Okay, let me show you the FAST standard. So I'm going to show you the FAST standard now. It stands for flexible, appropriate. Now, flexible, as I've told you, if you did the conceptual model in the beginning, you need to be flexible because what you thought you knew what was the lever of your project might change, and must be appropriate. I mean, it doesn't help you to go to the nth degree of detail when you haven't really established if you've got a business case yet. Structured and transparent. This is actually where you want to be structured so that somebody else can review your model and make it easier to be seen. Now, there was I must tell you, the one thing that did impress me about the FAST standard is that in the early days, it was the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales recognized the FAST standards because the chartered accountants realized that the big decisions are made on financial models, and there's no real, I shall put it, uniform standard on financial modeling. So it's really almost a self-imposed thing. But now I've shown the model to you. So now let me do, the proof of the pudding is often in the eating. And I'm going to now just show you the financial model itself. Now, this is the FAST standard. Now, one thing I must mention about the FAST standard is the model in terms of megabytes or whatever of your Excel sheet can become quite large. It is the price you pay for following the standard, but it does allow for transparency. And let me illustrate you. When you do, for arguments, calculations here, any one of these things here, you would see that you've got it's grouped into these clusters here. Because whatever you do here is actually the ingredients for that calculation is right above it. And there's a few little quick little things. If you want to track where that number comes from previously, there's a control square bracket, and look at that, it's just jumping. So for argument's sake, if I want to go to a previous price control square bracket, then I go, there, I can see where my inputs came from. The other thing I need to mention, and F5, then I want to go back. Okay, then there we go back. So just a little trick I showed you there now. But anyway, the point being, is that there's also a color format in any good spreadsheet, like i.e. inputs here is one color. You think from a previous let me do it here. A previous sheet is typically a blue one, so it comes from a previous sheet. Going to a next sheet, it will be a red color, and you've got these calculation blocks. Other thing I need to mention is that if you start getting involved in the FAST standard, with time you develop, let's call it templates or little bits of code, if I could put it that way. And if you think of it analogous to a house, every house has a foundation, has windows, has walls, has a roof. But if you think about it, some have 3 doors in the house, others have 20 doors. How many windows? So the building blocks of the house are the same, but their number and their configuration is different. And that's exactly the same in financial models. So if you've got these bits of code or predetermined calculation steps that you can use, which I've built up with over time, you can you basically build that into your model. And what's nice about that is you don't have to go and figure out new little calculation blocks every single time, because that also wastes time. And remember, then, because every time you need to do a new type of calculation procedure, you might get it wrong. So the nice thing is having these building blocks that have been tested gives you confidence as you're building your model further. Anyway, so as you can see, you'll see, just sorry about that, but just note that the zoom percentage is different on each page. But you could see that almost the structure of every page, sorry, not this one now, but here's the production, the time and the production. And you'll see that the structure is exactly the same. If I go here at the top, you'll see there the time trigger, time stamps, and here are all the various inputs that you've got. And the other thing I need to mention is that if you think of a financial model, it's a series of steps taking place in time. So time is your first important. And remember, I said the financial model, top to bottom, left to right. So time is your first thing. What happens when? When do you start operation? When do you start construction? Because that's where the big money is being given out in capital. When you're closing down, etc. So that's the time steps. And different things happen different times. Then you do production, and that could be how the tons and waste was moved. Remember, even waste incurs a cost for you. So you need to follow that. But once you've got, and you know where the various materials flowing throughout in a time sequence in your project, then it becomes fairly easy to slap the cash flows on, i.e. OPEX, because OPEX is related to tons, and also what is operating at the time, what pieces of equipment. Revenue is quite easy because you know the tons that you'll be producing each year. And then CapEx is also, that will be typically done here in the construction phase. And you can also S-curve it, a little bit in the beginning, and there's a major amount of money being spent to the mid to the end. But you can play around with that, and that also gives you an idea of how to structure your contracts with your vendors when you're building a project. Then, but once you've done all these cash flows, then it becomes relatively easy to do the financial metrics, because then all you do is you slap on your NPV and you do your NPV discount factor, which could be related to your WACC. In this case, it depends on what the WACC is that you put in. WACC is weighted average cost of capital. And then it becomes relatively easy, and you can start generating charts for yourself. For argument's sake, here you can say to yourself, well, jeepers, why is my OPEX so high here? Now, maybe you've got no choice in incurring that OPEX, but maybe if you have a plan, you can actually move this OPEX to later stages of the project. And why would you want to do that? Well, time value of money. So that's the beauty of giving these outputs for yourself and the project team, is that they can start seeing what are the levers that you can pull to make your project a success or more successful. My personal view is, if you don't have a financial model in your project somewhere, and a good one and one that people trust, you would be probably sitting, it's like a blind man. You don't know where you're going. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you want me to go more into the series in more depth into financial model, just click the like button and give me comments, and I would know that how much interest there is in this. Thank you.